Thanks,
Is that agreed?
And thanks for the opportunity to speak on Budget 2015. Last night, look, I voted against Financial Resolution number 1 as the only means I had of showing total opposition to the many failures and missed opportunities of this budget. It was a perfect platform, Budget 2015, for turning away decisively from austerity and embarking on a new national path. Unfortunately, and to re-quote Minister Michael Noonan, we didn't take the road less travelled. In actual fact, that would be the road of breaking free from cuts and decisively moving to a fairer distribution of taxation to benefit all our citizens. For the 5th budget in a row, Deputy Noonan, as I always expected him to, he's continued on this well-travelled, well-worn, harsh road, the road travelled by so many other European countries at the behest of Chancellor Merkel and Germany, but the harsh road of protecting great vested interests and keeping public services expenditure in a continuing straitjacket. A cursory glance at the comprehensive expenditure report of Minister Howland confirms this view. The social protection budget, including social insurance payments by workers, is actually cut by 1%, or €200,000 in budget 2015. The education budget rises by only 0.7%, or €60.4 million, and includes continuing cuts in the school capitation grant and other charges from past budgets. Even the health budget rises by just 2.3% to €13.46 billion. When Minister Varadkar, time and again in the media, as you know yourself, Minister, he argued that the 2014 outturn needed to be at least €13.6 billion just to maintain basic hospital and patient services this year. The ongoing scandal of hospital waiting lists and extreme pressures on emergency departments, such as in my own constituency in Beaumont, at Beaumont Hospital, it'll hardly be addressed, and couldn't be addressed indeed, in the estimate before us. So deputies who have already said that the health budget is a phony budget, once again, which will impinge very heavily on the most vulnerable of our citizens, our sick citizens. It's certainly borne out when you look at the full expenditure review. There's also a projected $130 million for savings in the health budgets in procurement, drug costs, agency costs, clinical audit and special investigation, when they're all included. But will this be achieved, Cathaoirleach? We know what happened last year to the so-called probity medical card savings. There are also major cuts, of course, in the communications, energy and natural resources budget of over 5%, and in the transport, tourism and sport budgets of 2.6%. Two ministries, of course, are headed up by very inexperienced ministers who perhaps didn't distinguish themselves in respect to in other roles. The very belated 42% increase in the environment budget is welcome, but the increase of 1.2% or 638 million in overall gross capital and current expenditure is hardly a dramatic end to austerity, which the usual media chorus we heard this morning is actually hailing today. I know that ministers have been suggesting that lower and middle income families will be slightly better off after this budget. That's not actually the case, even when you take into the account the impact of water charges on household finances. Even with the subsidy for certain social protection payment recipients of €100 a year, and even with the tax relief for income taxpayers to a maximum of €100 a year, the net impact of water charges on many lower and middle income families will see them worse off. And again today, let me call for the abolition of Irish Water, for this unnecessary incubus with its cosseted, highly paid, unnecessary staff, effectively placing a barrier between the work of this House and ordinary households and local authorities. There's nonsense we have at the moment where we contact a post box office in Cork in order to get some kind of response, who then gets back onto Fingal County Council, in my case, and then gets back onto me, and then gets back onto Irish Water. We have a circle of totally unnecessary bureaucracy. Let's get rid of Irish Water, Cathaoirleach, and I'd hope you'd put that point of view to your own party indeed, because I think you're heading for annihilation with the Labour Party at the next general election. You're going to lose probably at least 50, 60 seats between us if Irish Water survives. It's a most unnecessary and unjust tax, and Irish people just will not accept it. During the run-in to the budget, Fine Gael ministers and lobby groups like IBEC continually raised the impact of the 52% marginal tax rate on middle and higher income earners. The ministers proposed income tax changes, including the cut to the 41% rate and now higher entry point of €33,800, and the USC charges are said to reduce their tax burden. But it has to be remembered there's very little recognition in this budget, and many of us did consider what would be the impact of a 1 or 2% cut in VAT overall. It has to be recognised that all citizens are taxpayer and of the very aggressive nature of consumption taxes like VAT. Again, in Budget 2015, Cathaoirleach, we have a budget with a very significant amount of tax expenditures, particularly for the agribusiness. I estimated something like 30 million yesterday, Minister Noonan announced, and other big business interests, perhaps another 80 billion, including this new knowledge development or patent box. Yet, other than preliminary headline figures for the costs of each single new tax expenditure, we don't know the cumulative impact of tax expenditure on public finances. The Minister will come in here, as he and his predecessors have come in for the past 2 decades of my presence in this House, and give us a huge big finance bill, mostly concerning these tax expenditures, but we don't have any cumulative, any information, any cost-benefit analysis on the cumulative impact of all of those kind of expenditures. In actual fact, would we have a budget deficit at all this year or last year, or even any year since the crisis developed, if we didn't have those kind of expenditures? Yes, Cathaoirleach, I do welcome the proposed abolition of the double Irish, basically, I suppose, for our reputation as a country. I also recognise the government's commitment to hold on to the 12.5% corporate tax rate. Minister Noonan told me, of course, a few months ago that the corporation tax rate, the average, he called it, effective corporation tax rate is 10.7 or 10.9% since 2008. But I don't know really what that means. What does it mean? Well, we know there are some huge companies who are paying only 1 or 2%. I think most citizens whom we represent outside the Oireachtas would expect us to deliver a 12.5% tax rate. They pay a PAYE rate of 40%, or the standard rate, and they'd expect to pay, or the VAT rate. They'd expect corporates to pay the tax rate that this House has designated, and we've always dodged that issue. In my own budget submission, which I made last week to Minister Noonan and Howland, I advocated 2 solidarity taxes to raise about 900 million. These were a new 48% income tax rate on individual incomes above €100,000, and you might remember with a number of other independent deputies I proposed that over the last number of years, and the bank levy of at least 500 million to continue down through the years until the national debt to GDP ratio falls below 60%. But of course, Cathaoirleach, with a Fine Gael-led government, there was never a chance of such a solidarity tax. And of course, yesterday, neither minister had much to say about banking. So, in conclusion, Cathaoirleach, I'm delighted for the opportunity to make those few remarks. I think yesterday, unfortunately, wasn't the end of austerity, was a missed opportunity by 2 ministers who may well regret it when we're all on the hustings, perhaps next year. Thanks.